Alison, I cannot believe that you and I are finally talking because I don't know if you remember. Well, I'm sure you don't. I chased you
No,
down
I do
this-
remember. I do. You chased me into the bathroom, I think.
I was trying to find out who your doctor was because you got up. We were at this conference in Austin and you told your story. And I wanted to know how you did it and who your doctor was. Because at that time, my friend's daughter, who was 10 years old, had a terminal brain tumor. And you said Dr. Naisha Winters. And so we got Phoenix in to see Dr. Naisha, and Phoenix now is 18. So, yes.
You know, it's amazing how fate happens that brought you and I together. Also, I was, when I was first diagnosed, I was out of kale. I didn't know that I had a genetic mutation that I couldn't process kale very well, but I wanted this kale because I was told that kale could help cancer. And I went to a friend's house to pick kale, and she said, "Oh, do you know Dr. Naisha Winters? I really think you should go to her." So if I hadn't run out of kale, I never would have found Naisha, and then you and I never would have found each other. And so it's just amazing how the world works.
And so many lives saved, including yours. So
Yeah.
you are 8 years into a 7-month terminal diagnosis?
6.8 months given to live in 2013. So this summer was my 10-year cancer anniversary. So,
Congratulations.
yeah, so we're like 10 years and several months at this point.
So for people who are listening into this, when people stumble across one of our doctors and Dr. Naisha, they always want to hear from people who have adapted a metabolic approach to their cancer process. And you and I have been in this space, and you in it much longer. You know that there are thousands of people out there that have implemented the metabolic approach. But you have been living, breathing, eating it. And you also created a business educating other people how to do it. But before we get into that, can you take a step back and talk a little bit about your journey and what got you here today?
Yeah, so I had no idea I was sick with cancer. Of course, I was a world champion extreme skier, so I was a professional athlete. I was running an organic farm with my husband, so I figured, we have clean air, we have clean water, we have clean food. We've heard this a million times. I thought I was healthy until I got diagnosed with cancer. So one day I was actually cooking bacon at the stove, and I practically burned the house down. And my husband was like, "Okay, there's been a lot of weird things going on." I was a keynote speaker for Microsoft, and I forgot to get on the plane. So there were some really big signs that things weren't right. But, nobody really talks about, what are the signs of brain cancer. And I'd been to a bunch of doctors. The doctors didn't know how to look at blood work closely. They didn't ever order a scan. So here I was walking around with a tumor somewhere between a baseball and a softball in my head.
Wow.
Huge. Like if you look at the CT scan, I mean, you can see that it literally took almost 3/4 of my brain away and forced this tumor into my head. It probably been growing for 20 years. I thought I was healthy. I was 17 years a vegetarian. Oops, it turns out my DNA does not make me a good vegetarian. So I had emergency surgery. I don't actually remember any of this happening. And luckily, when I got out of the hospital, they said, "Look, we want you to do double chemo, double radiation. We want you to start right away. But because your surgery was so life or death, we need you to recover from the surgery, and then we're going to start treatment." Okay. Luckily, in that time of recovery is when I went to pick kale, and then I heard of Naisha, and then I called, and Naisha was having a 4-day retreat. And they said, "Oh my gosh, someone just canceled. Can you come?" And I said, "Well, actually, I've got to work this weekend." And I hung up the phone. And then I sat there and thought, Alison, this is life or death.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, my doctors never told me that my case was terminal. I found out on the internet in that time that I hung up on Naisha was that, with standard of care, I was still going to be terminal. So Naisha, I said, what do I have to lose? I canceled my job offer. I went to the 4-day retreat with Naisha. And in that 4 days, she laid out basically, here are all the root causes of cancer, primarily metabolic in nature, but also, all the different ways that cancer can have its favorite foods. And I'm a science girl. I was a climate change scientist for many, many decades. And so I just had that scientific brain, and it just made sense to me. There's a reason I'm sick. I just didn't know why, because I thought I was living this dream life.
Right.
So once we dove in deeper, to the labs and the DNA and my health history, I was like, oh, there's literally 150 things that have contributed to my cancer. But I felt so empowered because once you know why, you can do something about it, right? If you have high calcium, you can take vitamin K2 and pull down the cancer growth factor. And so I just was like, I'm going to look at this as my new biggest mountain to climb, because I'm this professional extreme skier, climbs mountain, jumps off cliffs. So
this is your new sport.
It was my new sport.
Out of the cancering process.
And I used, because I was actually a really fat, dorky math kid. And that was kind of, because I grew up in an alcoholic household. So then I reached a point where I was like, you know what, I'm going to prove everybody wrong that I'm not a fat, dorky math kid. And so I was like, I'm going to win the world championships of skiing. I don't think I actually thought that, but my body was like, that was a compensating mechanism.
Right.
So all the tools that I learned to conquer fear, I then channeled into. And at first, I want to say I was fighting my cancer. I would say now that I'm more like loving my cancer, and I'm looking for the messages that I'm learning from my cancer. But at first, it was a war. And I was like, okay, I'm going to bat to save my life. And I'll do whatever it takes.
And I'm going to destroy this.
Yep. And go ahead.
One of the interesting things you said is that you saw the science behind it. And I think a lot of people think, oh, Dr. Nash is a naturopath doctor, and that there's not science. And trying to explain that there's actually more science involved in the metabolic approach. When standard of care approach is you have this type of tumor, it's this size, it's this location, it's grown into other organs, or it's grown into your lymph nodes.
Yeah.
And A plus B plus C equals this protocol treatment. That's the extent of the science sometimes, right?
Yeah. And my doctors were still stuck in the somatic theory of cancer, which is there is a gene mutation and then that causes cancer. They're not looking at the root causes of cancer. And even the naturopaths that I went to, I have to say they weren't certified or trained by Dr. Naisha. And it was more like kind of a hippy dippy, oovy groovy approach. All my naturopaths and all my standard of care people were basically throwing darts at cancer and seeing what stuck. And what I really loved and resonated with Naisha was, if you have this, you do this. If you have this, you do this. Everything was like cause and effect. And it wasn't just throwing darts at a dartboard and hope that we beat cancer. A lot of times I see, some of my clients and myself, the doctors want to do 100 things because they're not sure how to beat cancer. So they just want to put you on a clinical trial, or they want to do double chemo because they know that regular chemo doesn't work. But they never tested me.
Right.
They never tested my tumors to see what the personality was. They never even did a chemosensitivity test. They never sent the tumor out for further pathology testing to see what the tumor's behavior was. So when Naisha said, look, we're going to test, assess, and not guess, I was just like, this is what I want.
Yes. That's what you need. And going back to fighting cancer. So you said that you don't fight it anymore.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about that transition and that journey, and also explain why you don't fight it?
Yeah, I think for the first maybe 7 years, it was like basically a war on cancer, which was I'm going to identify all my root causes and I'm going to keep researching and looking and see what root causes I haven't found yet. And then I'm going to identify them and then I'm going to do something about it. So,
Gonna destroy them.
yeah, that was working. If you have radon, then you can get a low income radon mitigation. If, you have, there's a million different things. If you have a parasite, for example, I had a parasite, then I'm going to go on NATIA's anti-parasitic treatment. So it was basically identify one of the root causes, then go ahead and fix it. What I found is in 2018, I had a blip show up on my MRI and nobody thought it was cancer, but then it turned out it was growing and spreading. And my first thought was, what did I miss? So let's go back through my Dr. Dacia treatment plan, see she mentioned a million things to do. And it really takes, I would say, almost 5 or 10 years to implement NATIA's treatment plan, right? It's like changing your whole life. But I was doing all those things. I had missed a few. So I corrected that problem in 2018. And then in 2020, it came back again. So I said, wait a minute, maybe there's more to it than just being a checklist. And what I realized is that you can have cancer be a checklist of things to do, but you also have to surrender to the present moment. You also have to realize that cancer is about loving yourself, loving other people, having grace, having joy, having happiness. If you're spending so much time fighting, that becomes a war in your own body. Mm. And that creates stress and can even raise insulin and can limit you from detoxing and can limit your immune system from building itself back up. So because I was trying so hard, I was actually ended up fighting my own self by working too hard to fight cancer. Yeah. So I always say there's full effort over here and full surrender and love and grace over here, and you put them together.
Yeah, meet in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So true. And that's been one of the things that's been hard for me to see moving into this space and working with people that are in that cancering process is that constant fight mode.
Yeah. Yeah. Because that just drives up cortisol, that fighting mode. We're meant to fight tigers maybe, once every 5 years, but not once every 5 minutes.
Right.
So I always tell myself and I tell my clients, like, spend your morning like working on NATIA's treatment plan or your Dr. NATIA's certified doctor's treatment plan or your nutritionist's treatment plan that's trained by MATC. Then spend the whole afternoon doing anything and everything that has nothing to do with cancer.
Right.
Because if we don't have joy and purpose and love, mm-hmm. What is the point of inhabiting this body?
Yeah.
And that's a hard thing to work on.
And what was your journey? So after you had your initial surgery, was the cancer gone?
It was gone for 5 years. And so everybody always says, oh, just make it 5 years and then you've got it.
Right.
Bullshit. Right. I was ready to celebrate my 5th year scan with a gluten-free bagel. And that's how delusional I was that, I didn't realize, at the time that keto is going to be my life.
Right.
I hadn't written my cookbook at that point. I hadn't really replaced all my favorite foods. So I was still craving a lot of things. That has since fixed, but I had a recurrence at my 5th year. And so then I looked more into the root causes, and I did discover maybe 5 new things, radon being one of the biggest ones, that I did correct at that point. And then it came back in 2018, and I was like, okay, take a good hard look at the treatment plan. And what I realized is I was kind of faking meditation. I don't even know how to like put it, but I was doing meditation, but I wasn't being it. Does that make sense?
Yes, yes.
So like you can listen to a recording and you can be like, oh, I'm doing everything Naisha told me to do. But if you're not embracing that thought process, if you still wake up every day and think, oh my gosh, is it going to recur today? Or if you still wake up and think like, what am I missing? How do I fix this? If that means I'm not in the present moment. And so at that point, I got a meditation teacher, I got a therapist. I also signed up for a meditation group, and I just really threw my eggs in the kind of the emotional trauma meditation basket. And I still think I'm there. That was 2018. Now it's 5 years later. I feel like I'm just skimming the surface of that work.
Yeah. That's a life. I mean, if
a
you
life, yeah.
then I mean, like they've been practicing this for their whole life. Now, going back to after you had your surgery and then you met Naisha in that time, you changed your lifestyle, right?
Yes.
You implemented keto, you did a lot of these things. So do you contribute those changes to that kind of 5-year gap, or because
I mean, I was eating completely wrong for my DNA, completely wrong for my labs. So I had to stop being a vegetarian. I had to start eating meat. I had to deal with my DNA SNPs that like didn't allow me to process kale very well, like the CBS. So I had a hard time with kale and broccoli. So I brought on like 5-methylfolate and B12 to help. People say they don't want to know their DNA, but once you know what your DNA is, there's usually a workaround for everything. It's not like you're doomed.
Yeah, you can never have red meat, or you can never have sulfates or any of that. What do you need to do?
Yeah, I mean, maybe the only one that I can't do is I probably will never be able to do rice or grains again. But I feel that cauliflower rice cooked in a stick of butter or a jar of ghee is better than regular rice.
Right.
So I had to create recipes because back then there was nothing.
Nothing.
Keto on the internet was just like
junk keto.
Junk food, Costco sausage with unorganic cream cheese, no vegetables, no dirty keto.
It was a lot of the Atkins kind of style too.
It was, and it was high protein.
Has come a long way, right?
Yeah, it's come a long way, but you still have a hard time finding recipes that don't contain things like almonds, for example. So I just was like, I have to start over. But I wanted to develop all the foods that I love. If I'm going to be on this for life, if we realize and accept that metabolically broken people are the standard kind of right now for America, and I was one of those people.
Oh, unfortunate.
Even though I was a professional athlete and an organic farmer, I was metabolically broken. And the cool thing is when I got cleaned up on my diet, not only did my cancer stop in my head, but like my polycystic ovarian disease went away, the fibroids in my breasts went away, my yeast infections went away, my bladder infections went away, my arthritis went away, my Hashimoto's thyroiditis resolved itself. It was just like, that's when I became a believer. And you know, Naisha will say, yeah, if you eat more fat and less carbs and moderate protein, then this is going to change your life. But until you actually do it, and until you see your labs get better, it's hard to believe it.
Yeah. And also the challenge is that once that stuff gets better, you can't go back because your body is muscle memory. So it remembers. So you have that gluten-free bagel, right, with whatever they're using, rice flour or cassava or whatever is in it, right? And it can put you right back into your PCOS can activate again,
Absolutely.
Hashimoto's can activate again. It's because our bodies are just, it's muscle memory, right? They figure out how to live in a certain way, and it's always trying to balance out.
Well, it's amazing how many diseases are related to insulin resistance, which then, of course, is related to inflammation, which then, if we peel off another layer, is mitochondrial damage.
Mm-hmm.
Because really, cancer is not just a metabolic disorder, it is a disease of broken mitochondria. So my life goal is not only to find peace and happiness, but it's to repair my mitochondria. And then, boom.
Yeah. And I know that one of your other missions is educating people.
Mm-hmm.
So, can you talk a little bit about your work with other individuals that are in the cancering process and what this journey has done for you on that side of things?
Yeah, when I started, when Naisha asked me if I wanted to do training with her in 2014, I only did it to save my life. I did not do it because I wanted to be work in oncology nutrition. So my number one goal was to save my own ass. And so I spent that year just really, really deep dive into everything that caused cancer and how we could repair it, especially nutritionally. Then I got out and Naisha was like, "You're really good at this. You should, help other people." And I was like, "Oh, I mean, I'm too busy just like helping myself." But I found that just the way my mind works, I feel like I like the detective work.
Yeah.
It's kind of like being Sherlock Holmes and you've got like the best murder mystery ever. And I just loved like putting all the pieces of the puzzle together. So she was like, do some training on your friends and your family. And I would look at their DNA and I would look at their labs and I could just see all the pieces of the puzzle coming together. I mean, you can relate. And so every single person that I looked at for my homework had some kind of massive disease or disease process or metabolic disorder, looking at a future of cardiac problems, looking at a future of Alzheimer's, looking at cancer. And so I kind of realized like, I'm not alone on this cancer journey. Every single person on this planet is walking around with their own set of problems. And that actually, it helped me feel less alone because I think when you have cancer, you feel like, poor me, why do I have cancer and everybody else is fine? And you know what? That's not the case. Every single person I've ever looked at had some big thing or a series of big things that were life-threatening. For example, when I did my husband's DNA, and this was, way back in 2014, he had genetic hemochromatosis. And it killed, we found out once I found out he had it, which of course, his PCP wouldn't believe me. So I had to give them the genetic test. I had to run the lab work and show them. We found out that his dad had died from it at 52. My husband was 45 at that time.
Wow.
So if I hadn't gotten cancer, we would have never found out. And the ironic thing is here I was a vegetarian and got sick and found out that I needed to eat meat. My husband is a cattle farmer, cattle rancher. All he does is eat red meat. He got diagnosed with genetic hemochromatosis. He basically had to adopt a red meat-free diet. Yeah. So we both were eating the absolute wrong thing for our bodies. Yeah. So, I hear these naturopaths saying like the body knows, it knows what it needs. I'm not so sure. We kind of live in a stressed out, toxic world, and I'm not sure we're clean enough to really know if the pond just got muddier, because the pond was already really muddy. If you threw another handful of toxins at the muddy pond, you're not even going to notice.
I don't even know that we notice symptoms anymore, or that we know what symptoms are.
Because we're so inflamed and we're so metabolically broken. Our mitochondria is so broken that I didn't notice that I was lactose intolerant until I stopped eating dairy. I had no symptoms of lactose. I had no symptoms of being grain intolerant or gluten intolerant. Once I cleaned up that pond, that muddy pond became clear blue, crystal clear water. If I even had just one bite, I was in distress.
Oh, you could immediately tell. Yeah,
You
it's
could
not
immediately tell, but
something
until the pond was clean, my pond was so muddy, you just had no idea what was causing the problem because it was coming, the problems were, my diet, my lifestyle, the stress,
Well, and as a society, we've just normalized everything.
Yeah.
It's just like, oh, well, I'm allergic to everything under the sun. Oh, okay, well, that's just you. You were just born that way, or that just developed. Well, no, we shouldn't be allergic to everything under the sun. We shouldn't have this massive peanut allergy and nut allergy and all of these other things going. We've just normalized,
Yeah. Well, I had, for a good example is I had seasonal allergies that, we live on a farm. So every time we would hay, I literally was flat out incapacitated, couldn't move for like 3 weeks. I cleaned up my terrain. I cleaned up my body, the stress, the insulin, the toxins. All of a sudden, I don't have allergies anymore.
Oh, wow.
So our seasonal allergies, and I notice that if I make like a small adjustment with having like maybe a touch too many carbs, then immediately my seasonal allergies come back. So insulin resistance and eating too many carbohydrates is completely related for me to my body having an inflammatory response to the grasses in the air. You lower the inflammation in your body.
That's the last thing you need. You need to be able to go outside and enjoy it.
Yeah. Well, and
you have the tools.
Well, and I feel better now at 58 than I did in my 20s, because I didn't know how to take care of myself. I studied nutrition in college, but they told us all the wrong things. Don't eat any fat, 7 servings of grains a day, tons of legumes. So I followed all their recommendations.
And especially
what did it give me?
Athlete eating like the 7 times a day, the low
fat. Oh, all those Goop packets and Cliff Bars and things like that. All I ate. I thought I didn't even eat sugar. I didn't even know what was a carbohydrate when I started. And so now, it's really exciting to me. Like if you look at the studies, if you look at like cancer cells in a petri dish, for example, and you put glucose or fructose, a lot of people don't realize that fruit is sugar. And it turns out that fruit can be like one of cancer's favorite things to metabolize. So I didn't know. I was eating tons of fruit and I was told fruit was healthy.
Yeah.
But then you put those cancer cells in a petri dish with like, say, olive oil, for example, they can only ferment glucose. They can only ferment carbohydrates. They can also metabolize a little bit of glutamine, and we can talk about that later, but we're going to not have enough time to talk about all that. But the main thing is we can alter our metabolism so that cancer is undermined and our healthy cells become healthier. And isn't that the magic of all, that you or I get healthier? And then the cancer cells are like, I'm dying and struggling, and so that's what I picture when.
Yeah. I think of it as our body, everything is a living cell. Our tissue is living, breathing. Our skin is, our organs are, our cells are, and they're part of us. They're a part of this, vessel, and our soul is in this, and we're all in it together. And we're trying to live in this symbiotic relationship. And when one thing gets sick, then that throws the balance of everything off. And so our body is constantly trying to figure out just how to live in this. But when one gets sick, it kind of starts taking everybody down. And I know Naisha talks about us being in this cancering process.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about what she means about the cancering process? And it kind of goes back to that, like not fighting it, right? We're not kind of necessarily trying to fight the cancer, but we're in this process. What does that mean?
Well, to me, it means that we need to look at all the different root causes that cancer the opportunities that cancer has in my body. So like, for example, if I'm a mental, emotional wreck, or if I had trauma in my childhood, that is going to create stress in my body, which can raise cortisol, which can then raise my blood sugar. If I even have, like, say, a current stressor, like my mother calls, I can test my blood sugar before I talk to my mom and after, and my blood sugar goes up. So a lot of people just focus on one thing, like, oh, I'm eating perfectly. Well, we have to deal with our mind. If we're not dealing with our mind, they say stress kills, but they never explain to us why it kills, what happens scientifically in the body that can feed into cancer or feed into ill health. And what it really is it's a process of, destroying our mitochondria.
Mm-hmm.
So all the different stressors, whether they're mental, emotional, physical, I was exercising too much. People who exercise too much, that creates stress on the body. People who exercise
skinny is
not
healthy.
enough, then it creates a problem. So it's all about trying to find what is right for our bodies, your body, my body. How are our hormones? How's our immune system? How's vitamin D3? How is our insulin as far as genetics go, as far as what we're eating? How are our toxins? How is our water tested? How is our air tested? What is in our food? What is in our body products? What are in our cleaning products? What do we put in our hair? How about biotoxins like mold and Lyme disease and parasites and C. diff and viruses and infections? So all of these things can contribute to
they're around us that we might not see.
Yeah. And we often don't even know they're there until you look at the labs and the DNA and the health history. And then this Sherlock Holmes, it's just there. Yeah. You can see an infection in the body. My client yesterday, it was very apparent that she was fighting something massive, and none of her regular doctors had even seen it. So the process is that we've got to one by one, with grace and happiness and joy, work on all of these different things. And it's kind of like a roller coaster. I was saying that I thought health was like you start here and then you're just going to be here. And when you're here, then cancer can't exist. Well, that's true, but it's kind of like a process of a roller coaster to get from here to here.
Yeah.
So for example, like when I started detoxing my body, because I found out that I had a lot of mold, I had a lot of heavy metals, I had plastics and gasoline and solvents, and I live in the middle of beautiful nowhere. Where these things got into my body? Wildfires, maybe? I don't use these things. Anyway, they were there, so then I'm going to do.
We can test for it.
We can test for it, and then we can say, okay, we're going to use sauna with a binder, and we're going to do that 5 days a week. And then we're going to, through our bioelimination with our sweat, our poop, and our pee, we're going to get rid of those toxins nice and slowly, because once we get rid of the toxins, that's another cancer growth opportunity.
Right.
And so we need to make sure each cancer growth opportunity is systematically eliminated.
And not always attacking it and fighting it.
Not always attacking it. Like, again, I spend that morning on the work, and then in the afternoon is joy and walking and being in my garden or riding my bike or going surfing. And it doesn't even have to be, it could be something that's just as nice as sitting in a chair and feeling the breeze on your face and watching the butterflies fly around. Yeah. Whatever brings a person joy is what you need to find. And you also need to find your purpose, because if we don't have a purpose, why are we here?
Right. Right. And, on that note, and this will be my last question, and then we can wrap it up. For somebody who is newly diagnosed with cancer, and they could be in a reoccurrence, but they're just now kind of looking at this approach, what would you tell them?
First of all, take a deep breath, because a lot of our doctors, all of my doctors, I have a million of them, 18 of them at the current moment, They are just like, you've got to do something now. Cancer's growing immediately. Well, cancer has often taken, Nietzsche says 5 to 7 years. It might have even been 20 years to grow in my case. So take a deep breath, take an inventory, find someone like myself that can help you to look at the potential root causes. Someone like myself can also connect you with a Dr. Naisha trained doctor, because you need to change your diet and lifestyle with someone like me. And then you need to change over here your treatment strategy.
Mm-hmm.
You need to get the data before you leap into a treatment plan or even a diet plan, because every single one of us is different. And the medical world wants to treat us like we're all the same. We all need to eat this thing, or we need to do this thing, or we need to have this treatment or that treatment. Well, let's get some testing and let's find out what's actually going on with your body. Take a deep breath, get the right people on your team. The way I like to think of it is your team is like a pyramid, that your Dr. Naisha trained doctor is at the top, and then all of the other doctors, and including me, the nutritionist or the TAP advocate, we're all the support staff. And anytime one of these doctors or nutritionists or anybody on our team recommends something, we then run it through the Dr. Naisha trained doctor at the top of the pyramid. Because a lot of times, like if I had 18 different doctors, they're going to give me 18 different plans.
Yeah.
I need to decide. So there's two things. There's your Dr. Naisha trained doctor, and then also your own heart and your head is part of that. Do you want to look at the future of cancer treatment? Or are you fine with standard of care and maybe implementing a metabolic approach with that? Everybody should do, ideally, what is the best for them, because the treatment that we believe in and do is the treatment and diet that's going to work the best.
Yeah.
There's no convincing people, right? It's just like,
in what feels right. And so often we do not listen to our intuition. We don't listen to our intuition because of the peer pressure of our family or the peer pressure of our doctor. Oftentimes when your family knows you have this diagnosis, they want you to destroy that cancer in you because they want you to live, and they think that that's the right answer. And that can come from them. And then we don't listen to our intuition. We get, I know you've seen this, where people will have a doctor that's trained by Naisha. And this could have been a traditional MD oncologist that then moved more into this metabolic integrative world. And then their standard of care oncologist that is paid for through insurance. And the funny thing is they're like, I have to listen to that doctor because they're paid for by insurance, but I don't have to listen to this doctor. And it's this weird dichotomy of actually, no, you should just listen to your intuition and what feels right. And even kind of take a moment and sit with the cancer.
Yeah. I think cancer is a gift. I hate it too. I say it's a gift and a curse. Thank you, cancer. F you, cancer. But it really has been a messenger to me. Because when I first got diagnosed, all I could think of is I need to go back to before I had cancer. And I'll never forget the day that Naisha looked at me and said, Alison, if you go back, that back is what gave you cancer in the first place. You had all those stress hormones, insulin, toxins, all that mess is what got you into cancer. So you need to think of, what do you want to do moving forward? Who do you want to be in the future? And visualize. It's almost like, because I'm a farmer, it's like planting a garden. When I plant those seeds for the future, then I watch them bloom. Because cancer taught me how to clean up my stress, my insulin, my hormones, my toxins, how to repair my mitochondria, how to be a healthier person. It's like I'm a new flower that's blooming because I'm able to grow and expand in ways that I never would have done without cancer.
Yeah.
And so cancer is an opportunity, which it sure doesn't feel that way when you get diagnosed. There were a lot of tears in the beginning. And it's awful, especially when you find out it's terminal. But one of the things that I learned along the way is my doctors kept saying, we have a great chance of success if you do double chemo and double radiation. So I was ready to march down that path until I learned from Naisha that success just means that I'm going to live 1 day, 1 month, 6 months past their planned expiration date for me. So if I did double chemo and double radiation, it's possible I could have lived 12 months or 18 months. When I found out what success meant to an oncologist, that changed everything.
Yeah. And just even knowing what questions to ask.
Yeah, knowing what
like
questions
you didn't ask.
If I hadn't asked, like, how long am I going to live without treatment? How long am I going to live with treatment? I would have gone right down that alley. Now, I'm not ever dissing standard of care either. The thing is you need to test. The doctors just wanted to do all these, double chemo, double radiation, and a clinical trial. They had never even tested the tumor beyond the standard, 7 things that they do in-house at the hospital. Once I ran the Tempest test with 648 things, it basically showed my tumor was not radiation sensitive and it was not chemosensitive. So I would have gone through all of that horrible treatment and it wouldn't have been the right treatment for my cancer.
Right.
So once I found out what my cancer's personality was like through taking a breath, having that testing, getting the information, and determining that I wanted to live a long, happy life and die of old age. The doctors just wanted to kill the tumor. If they happened to kill me at the same time, it really didn't matter. That's why I so enthusiastically wanted, to follow Dr. Naisha and do what she said, because she was like, look, we remove all of cancer's favorite fuels. We get you on the right treatments for your type of tumor, and you're going to live a long, happy life and die of old age. And I was like, okay, to me, that's success.
Yeah.
Is living that long, happy life.
Well, I'm so glad that you made that choice and that you did, because you have helped thousands and thousands of people. And not only that, you have trained others who have helped thousands of people. So you have made a huge impact and a huge difference, not just in your own life, but in the life of others. And I appreciate you. I know Naisha appreciates you, and this community appreciates you. And we are so glad you are here with us to make such an impact.
Well, I can't thank you guys all enough, because I wouldn't even be here today without all of you guys. And I just want to tell everybody out there that there is hope.
Oh.
Cancer is not like this. It is an awful thing, but like I said, it can be a messenger. It can be a butterfly. It can be teaching you how to live a new life that you never thought was possible. Did I ever think that I would be working in the field of oncology and helping other people? No way. Does it bring me incredible joy? Is it hard? Yes, but it's beautiful. And here we are in this journey on this roller coaster together, and knowledge is power. Having that power versus just like kind of laying in my hospital bed and waiting to see what the next scan told me, like that is depressing.
Yeah.
Knowing that I can wake up every day and make myself a healthier person and a happier person. I mean,
and I follow you. You live life to the fullest, and I love that. And I love seeing you and your husband out there adventuring and having experiences and enjoying this planet and Earth and everything that you do. So,
well, it's those things, the big things and the little things. It's all, when you have a near-death experience, you appreciate even washing the dishes.
Yeah. Very beautiful. Thank you, Alison. You have an amazing day, and we'll be talking to you soon.
Lots of love.
Lots of love.